number 34 we have Super Monaco Grand Prix, developed by Prix Software and published by US Gold in 1991. And that means this guy is not Alan Prost, it is Gerhard Berger. You may remember this game has been covered before in the Lemon Amiga play guides, and on the title screen, if you remember, we can change between joystick and the mouse, and I can't believe anybody uses the mouse playing this particular game. I always choose that joystick. And let's fast forward to the point where we actually got to Monaco in the review. Yes, this is exactly the same footage from the review, and you can see Monaco itself is very fast with very tall buildings. Super Monaco Grand Prix features 4 tracks, the 4th being Monaco itself. And unlike the real Monaco itself, this track is not too hard. It means we can fly around this thing at top speed, and that means we can qualify in a high position. This game is very much an update of the sprite-based Grand Prix circuit model that we saw in an earlier review, and unlike Grand Prix circuit, this is much faster and slicker in every department, but it's just as hard to get by those cars, and if we collide with the back of those, then they'll slow us down, and one major crash will send us off that track. You can see crowd whizzing by faster than the crowd in Outrun, and you can also see some great clouds and some great backgrounds, and I think it's a pity that more games on the Amiga didn't run this quickly and this smoothly. I think that this game is very exciting, and it definitely rewards the player the more they play and the more they practice this over the longer period. The only hardest part is trying to get into that tunnel, and trying to get into there sometimes makes one bump out, because on the real Monaco it is quite tight, but on this arcade game, yes, this is certainly in the arcade realm, then Monaco does not have any cliff-hanging corners and hairpin bends. No, this is a very easy arcade racer, so the average player should be able to get far with it. You can see we also have a rear view mirror, and that is actually Ayrton Senna behind us. If this was Gerhard Berger on the title screen, then maybe this is Gerhard Berger's Super Monaco Grand Prix. And that means the car in front must be Jean Alesi, because he's dragging around in 4th position. That's him overtaken, no problem. And somewhere in the distance, in another red car, we will find the professor himself, Alain Prost. This game is not for amateurs, and it's quite tricky. I'm playing this with the automatic gear at the moment, but if you select manual gears, then it gets quite so much harder, and you can see the only hard part is colliding with the side upon entering that tunnel, and apart from that, the player only has to slow down for a few of these corners and floor it throughout the rest. You can see that the graphics are chock full of data, and you can see our fastest laps and our current position. It's important to stay above the minimum required quota in every lap, and at the moment we have to score higher than 7th to qualify, otherwise we will not, and it's just gone down to 6th as we go over these stages, and unfortunately you will have to battle hard to stay in the top 3, and unfortunately we are in the top 4 at the moment with no way to gain an advantage. You might also pass a number of back markers on your way around, and they will not add to your quota. This game was coded by Zara Z.K. Johannes, and he of course created Power Drift, which we've seen already, and also went on to create Super Hang-On in 1988 before this. I think Super Monaco GP is a very polished game, maybe not as good as the arcade original of course, but they really did give this a valiant try, and it's fast and smooth and playable as well. It's not a pushover and definitely demands respect. I also appreciate this ending music, and I think that's one of the best ending musics I've heard in many a racing game. Monaco GP currently has a 66% rating on the Lemon Amiga database. At position number 33 we find Chase HQ2, otherwise known as SCI, Special Criminal Investigation.
Get moving, over.
After a briefing screen with some highly compressed audio sound effects, we find the main game itself, and you may find that this game runs rather quickly with the turbo, and you can see that this game is very highly polished, and it's better than the turbo outrun model that we got on the Amiga. Chase HQ2 was developed by ICE, yes, the same people who brought us Turbo Outrun, and this game uses exactly the same Turbo Outrun driving engine. They also created the diabolical Cisco Heat as well, so ICE was a very mixed bag of games on the Amiga. This was also published by Ocean Software, and Ocean were very keen to get their hands on this arcade conversion, and Ocean definitely made their name with movie licenses and arcade conversions. All we have to do is to catch up with that criminal, and this time, instead of ramming them off the road, we can jam that fire button and create a hail of bullets which should sink into the rear of that thing and eventually blow it up. We can also blow up all this traffic as well, and if we are struggling, we will be given some rockets with a handy helicopter. This game also comes with a selection of music which reminds me of Miami Vice, and the aim, just like every other Chase HQ game, is to get there before the time runs out.
Stop talking nonsense. I know nothing. It's Bob the boss. She isn't the one you guys are looking for. Bob, I know nothing.
A station wagon has been spotted on the coastline freeway with girl aboard. Apparently the missing joy. Get on it immediately. Over.
Here the announcer echoes over twice, and that's simply a glitch with my emulated setup. This game really loves a 000 basic unexpanded Amiga 500, and anything else may cause glitches and slowdowns. And you can see a few glitches on the screen at the moment, and so this emulated setup isn't really acceptable in this case. But you can see the driving model is very nice. It doesn't send the player careering off the road, not like the original Chase HQ, and you can actually rescue offs and things like that. The game actually flows much more quickly, and as I say, with a stock 000 processor, very smoothly as well, and it won't take as long to catch up to that criminal. We do gain a rudimentary map and a massive arrow which shows us where that criminal is, and you can see a large number of scenery changes from water and bridges to deserts, and the landscapes do change from level to level, and you can see the rocks on the side of the road don't judder like the ones on Lotus 3, although it's fair to remind everybody that the CD32 release of Lotus 3 was optimised and was much smoother. You can see another rocket load of helicopter bombs being dropped, and now all we have to do is to focus those on the back of that machine, and with only 8 seconds remaining, it's possible to waste all those turbos and to pile into the back of that.
Buddy, you did it again. I ain't Bob, but this will go anyone either. I guess Bob is somewhere over the mountains, you dummy.
The voice sound effects are very quiet, and I had to boost that audio a lot.
Bob Black, syndicate gang bosses in a limousine, fighting towards the mountain area. Get up. Over.
I'm not quite sure whether the girl actually mentioned a swear word during the interface process, but whether she did or whether she didn't, I think it's a great atmospheric effect having a girl read out those mission scenarios, and it's certainly one of those added touches which makes this game extra special. You can see we've now moved on to the desert, and to the right we have a rudimentary map which shows our distance, and we are given one extra turbo per level which puts us up to 4, so let's use one of those and make our way there. Unlike the original Chase HQ, you only have to use 1 per level, so hopefully if you only use that one and you are given one, then you should be able to have enough to last all the way through that game. If not, you'll have to risk using another one, and it really does not take long to catch up to that criminal, but look at that, 10 seconds remaining again, and that time will be reset as soon as we find whoever we are looking for. 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second remaining, and we only just found the criminal in time, having used all those turbos. So this game yet again demands some kind of respect. It's not very easy, and you might find yourself wandering through rivers and wandering through caves at this point, and that is yet again a great effect. Reminds me of the Batmobile and the Batcave. You can see moving waterfall effects on the Amiga aren't very common, and certainly not in these high speed racers.
I want my attorney. I ain't gonna say nothing till he comes. Call my lawyer. Boss don't say nothing till he comes. Ha ha ha.
I remember cranking up the volume to the full in these sequences, and that voice reminds me of Emil Muzz in the movie Dragnet.
Patrol wagon with Bob Black aboard has been stolen by an unknown perpetrator. You may use a shotgun now. Over.
We may use our shotgun now, and you can see a bus on that screen, and that gives away the fact that we'll be running into buses, and unlike Cisco Heat, that is actually quite good, and it reminds me of games like Burnout, which appeared on the Saturn and the PlayStation. But you can see careering into those buses really does slow us down. Chase HQ2 has a rating currently of 65%. Next up we find Prime Mover at position number 32, which was developed by Interactivision and published by Psygnosis in 1993. You can hear it opens with a terrific soundtrack and some novel introduction screens featuring some animation, and those are certainly better than most of the intros that we got on many racing games, and you can see some still screenshots as well. Title screen we can find the usual options and an option to practice as well, and we'll also find a very novel high score selection where we can find the fastest laps on all the tracks contained within this game, and you'll find lots of statistics can be saved also to disk, and of course you'll find my statistics there, having run a few of those races, and greatest times, best drivers and that kind of thing are certainly appreciated in a racing game, and collecting stats is very easy in this game, and with the WHD load version of course saves those to disk. So let's return again back to the main menu, and you can see this gives us a flavour of what the game is all about. At this stage it looks a little more like pole position, but as the game starts you'll see that this is a supreme jump above pole position, and so let's choose to start that race. From the go, we can choose our driver, and there's even a lady or two amongst those, and hopefully they will improve our driving abilities. But I'm just going to select this guy, and for this experiment let's name him, and we can also change his age as well. Let's enter my name and my age at the time of recording this, and in Prime Mover we can also add the driver's height and their weight as well. And there is a minimum height requirement to use these bikes. I'm not quite sure what it is, because whatever numbers I'm entering here isn't actually working. And we can also change the driver's weight as well. The lighter the driver, the more manoeuvrable, and the heavier driver will carry its own ballast. But you can see no amount of numbers is changing, unfortunately, the height register, so we'll just press enter for that and skip straight through the height and the weight. We can also change our bike in between each level, so let's check out the bikes on offer. There is a range in this game with advantages and disadvantages. This section reminds me of the game Ultimate Ride, with a very nice selection of vehicles, nicely shaded with some very interesting information, and you can see the acceleration curve as well. Before each race we will be given a rough map and also a few stats as to where we are. In this case we are in the USA for the easiest track on the entire calendar. As you can see, Prime Mover is a very slick racing game, even slicker perhaps than most of the Lotus series, and in this case we have a bike to manoeuvre around this track, and we have some on-screen visual display items which shows our speed and our rev counter, and most importantly the gear that we need to be in, so you'll have to make use of those, but don't go too quickly of course, otherwise you'll go off. And just like most bike sims, this overcompensates around these corners. You'll find yourself going off very quickly. You can also see the best lap total and our current lap time, and also our position. At the moment we are in 3rd position, and it's very difficult to get in the top 3, basically because all those other riders will challenge at top speed, so the player really does have to be on their best behaviour, otherwise the top 2 positions will be unattainable. Here we go in 2nd position, and 2nd is the best position I ended up with after all of that. Each race will be given the obligatory scores table where we can see where we are in that championship, and of course you'll have to qualify in a high position if you want to get anywhere with a championship. Let's move on to the next of the circuits in this game, and it's in Germany. We can check that out before we even race there, and we can even change our bike as well, which is always a fun thing to do. And these bikes really do make a huge difference. Sometimes if the course is twisty and turny, then you'll certainly need to make sure that your bike can handle that. There is quite some loading involved in this game as well, and luckily we are using the WHD load version, but if we weren't, then we would have to make use of those discs. I think the graphics on offer are certainly good, maybe not as good as F-17 Challenge that we saw, and there are no clouds on the horizon either, but there are a nice smattering of trees and elements which show us that we are going around a track at high speed, which is great. The chevrons aren't black, they're actually blue, which look like fast forward symbols, but those mean that we can actually get around that track and know which way the corners are going. Then you'll have to make use of all of those and memorize these tracks if you want the best position. You can see some of the higher position players are actually highlighted with a huge arrow again on the screen, and if we follow that arrow around, sometimes that will help us find all those corners ahead of time. But most of the time you will have to memorize these tracks and simply be careful. You can see we're now in position 2, so let's fast forward this as we drop down to 3rd position, and let's see if we can keep up with those other riders. It's certainly a difficult game, not a breeze like Lotus, and you won't find any AI meandering around the track left to right either. You'll find those guys are highly competent, so this game is far from a pushover, and I think the sound effects are great, and so is the music. The average score of this game, Prime Mover, is 65% on the Lemon Amiga database. Top Gear 2 made it to 31 in our poll, and Top Gear 2 was created of course by Gremlin Graphics, and you might be surprised to learn that this was actually a follow-up to the Lotus series. The title menu gives us a number of options, including changing that difficulty mode before we go on to the game itself. A very polished introductory sequence gives us a large number of courses that we can choose. We can select those individually, but those obviously require a password to unlock, and you can unlock those playing the full game. Even more options follow before we get to the game itself, and these change the gears and also the player name as well. Let's get rid of that and let's enter our name. Unfortunately, the name entry appears to be in the arcade sense of entering that name, and the player cannot type that directly onto the keyboard. Now let's choose to start, and at the beginning of every track it will give us a nice introductory screen which shows us the weather type as well, which can come in handy, and then we have even more options in the form of upgrades that we can choose, but unfortunately we don't have any cash at the moment, so let's speed through the last of those introductory screens and head on to the race. Top Gear 2 was created by Gremlin Graphics and released in 1994. Of course, Gremlin enjoyed great success with the Lotus series, first released in 1990 for Lotus 1, 91 for Lotus 2 and 92 for Lotus 3. Gremlin then came back in 93 to create Top Gear 1 for the SNES machine, and then in 1994 they created this for the consoles and backported it to the Amiga. So finally we got another racing game from Gremlin. You can see the graphics are very well drawn, and again we don't get clouds on that horizon, which is a solid colour, but apart from that we do get a great horizon and very smooth gameplay. The graphics in this game were created by Paul Gregory, and long-time fans of the scene may appreciate that Paul Gregory started out with Freescape and created lots of games using the open world 3D Freescape environment, including Darkside, Total Eclipse, which was an Egyptian version, and Driller of course appeared, as well as Castle Master. And unfortunately Paul Gregory moved away from the 3D environment and the 3D construction kit, which he also helped build, and by this time he was creating the maps and the artwork for Zool for Gremlin, and he moved on to this game, which is simply a bitmap racer and really isn't in a 3D environment. Top Gear 2 may be argued again a little bit harder than the original Lotus series. You can see we're only in 4th position by the end of the 5th lap, and we just made 3rd on that line. So 3rd position isn't amazing, and it doesn't give us much points or much score either, but it also doesn't give us much cash to spend in that shop. Unfortunately, this WHD version has a colour clash issue when printing out our championship scores, and you can't actually see those, but perhaps that was fixed in the actual game. And now we move on to a new level with new graphics and a new soundtrack. the selection of soundtracks on offer are great, and again these were composed by Patrick Phelan, and so Patrick Phelan's music are really greatly appreciated in Gremlin graphics games, and so Patrick Phelan from the Lotus series has been put to great use. You can see speech bubbles above that car, and we can give those guys some handy comments and shouts as we move through those, almost like my Commodore 64 reviews. And speech bubbles in games would make a great addition to many games, but they've actually done this with Top Gear 2. By pressing the fire button we can activate those nitros, and they will boost us head on into that landscape. We're given quite a number of those at the beginning of every level, and they will be restocked automatically at the beginning of every level, so it's important to use up all of those. Unlike the first track, I will certainly be using up all of those, and you can see that's definitely the way to get into first position. And finally we move on to another course via the shop. And the shop in this game isn't like Supercars 2 with everything all on one screen. No, you'll have to wade through very many menus of those, and it's great that we have rear armour and bumpers and things like that, engine upgrades and nitro, but unfortunately those are very expensive and you'll have to win races in order to afford those. So looking at this shop, we unfortunately can only buy 1 or 2 items at a time, so we can't run the stock market like Supercars 2. Let's anticipate the bad weather and actually go for the tyres in this case, and we'll go for the dry tyres, hoping that the next course is dry, and that should hopefully make sure that we can get around that thing. And again, once we have those tyres, then that's great, we have those, and we don't need to buy those again for the rest of the game. Moving on, we get more loading screens involved, and now here we are in the night course. Lotus 1, if we tap the back of those cars, all that will happen is we'll spin out, and that means that we can catch up to those other racers. There are 20 other racers, just like the Lotus series, so we'll have to get by all of those. And at the beginning everyone is bunched up, and you can see me trying desperately to use that turbo to get into the top 10, and then the players should find an easy ride as those cars spread out as the laps go on. And changing places in this game is very fast, and sometimes you can't always be comfortably guaranteed that first position, even using up all these turbos. And the nitro effect is certainly great, it's better than Super Hang-On, and again, apart from these skies being very bland indeed, the usual banded road in this case moves very quickly, and if I speed up that footage now that we've reached first place, yes, it can get very boring trailing around in first place just like every other racing game. And you can see that we have some armour as well on that screen. The green area shows that the damage on our car can be accumulated, again unlike the Lotus series, and we are using automatic gears at the moment with 4 gears, and that's an easier way to complete the game. Now we have some more money, we can hopefully buy some more items in that shop, and you really have to experiment to find out which ones are the best. And if you are accumulating damage, obviously the bumpers are a great buy, but those wide dry tyres weren't a great buy because here we are in Sydney in the rain. This game does not allow the player to change the music before each track, and that appears at random, but apart from that I think the gameplay on offer is very smooth and very slick, and it's certainly comparable to the Lotus series, but we don't seem to have the same levels of grip on the road, and so you will find the car sliding around slightly. And I've certainly played this game until the point where it crashed, but I really do appreciate this, and it was a great late contender for Gremlin to champion the racing genre. Top Gear 2 currently has a 67% rating on the Lemon Amiga database.